Our collective consciousness holds a very specific, monolithic image of Antarctica, a vast, sterile expanse of blinding white ice, punctuated by the stoic figures of penguins and dominated by a winter that knows no end. Yet this perception, while not entirely untrue, is a profoundly superficial veil over a reality of staggering complexity and deep mystery. Beneath the crushing weight of a multi-kilometer thick ice sheet, a world suspended in time may exist, a world with the potential to shatter our most fundamental paradigms about our planet's history and the nature of life itself. Imagine entire mountain ranges, the Gomburtsev Mountains, rivaling the European Alps in their majestic scale, yet completely invisible, their peaks and valleys entombed in ice for millions of years. Conceive of vast subglacial lakes, like Lake Vostok, which have been hermetically sealed from the outside world for eons, creating pristine, isolated ecosystems where life, if it exists, may have evolved along a completely separate and alien trajectory. Further complicating this picture is the disquieting existence of 15th and 16th century cartography, most notably the Piri Reis map, which appears to depict Antarctica not as a polar ice cap, but as a temperate, ice-free landmass, accurately charted with rivers and coastlines hundreds of years before its official discovery in the 19th century. The anecdotal evidence and hushed accounts from polar explorers, scientists, sailors, and adventurers who have weathered the continent's profound indifference are often peppered with observations of anomalous phenomena that conventional science struggles to categorize or explain. A persistent, almost mythical undercurrent suggests that this sixth continent is far from the desolate, lifeless wilderness we have been led to believe. There is a palpable sense that beneath the serene, white shroud of its glacial mantle, something of immense significance lies dormant, a secret of geological, historical, or even biological importance. I bid you a warm welcome, my dear friends, to this unique space where the nebulous world of dreams solidifies into the concrete realm of knowledge, where a calm and steady voice is your guide through the deep and resonant silence of the night. Tonight, we embark on an intellectual expedition to the most enigmatic continent on our planet, a domain of breathtaking, austere beauty and equally formidable secrets. We shall immerse ourselves in the perplexing enigma of ancient cartography, interrogating the very possibility of how archaic maps could display Antarctica's true subglacial topography. What profound truths, what lost histories are cryogenically preserved within the miles of stratified ice? How have modern scientists, against all odds, managed to detect life in environments so profoundly hostile they were long considered incapable of supporting any biology? And what intricate geopolitical reasoning compels dozens of the world's most powerful nations to maintain this continent under a unique and rigorously enforced international treaty? Before we proceed into these deep waters, I cordially invite you to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell, particularly if you find a unique comfort in drifting into slumber accompanied by thought-provoking discourse, and awakening to a richer, more nuanced understanding of the world. I strongly encourage you to do this now, for it is highly probable that by the conclusion of our extensive exploration this evening, you will be enveloped in a profound and tranquil sleep. Please make yourself comfortable. Allow your head to rest gently upon your pillow. Close your eyes and let us journey together beyond the well-trodden boundaries of the familiar. We will venture into a realm where the pristine, crystalline ice serves as the guardian of our planet's most obscure and profound secrets. Our investigation begins with Chapter 1, The Phantom Contours Beneath the Ice. Who could have possibly possessed the knowledge and the means to accurately map Antarctica long before its formal entry into the annals of recognized discovery? Centuries before the British naval captain Edward Bransfield, in the nascent years of the 19th century, glimpsed the faint outline of snow-dusted peaks on the distant horizon and rightfully identified them as part of a vast new continent, a landmass whose very existence had been a subject of fervent debate and widespread disbelief for generations. It appears that humanity already held some form of knowledge about these southernmost lands. This, at the very least, is the provocative narrative suggested by a peculiar collection of mystifying maps, artifacts created long before the continent was officially welcomed into the global consciousness. The mere existence of these cartographic documents unleashes a torrent of challenging questions. Who possessed the technological sophistication required to delineate a coastline with such startling precision? A feat seemingly impossible without having physically surveyed an ice-free continent. What was the origin of this extraordinary knowledge, this apparent glimpse into a world concealed beneath a thick glacial shield? To fully appreciate the astonishing and anomalous nature of these maps, one must immerse oneself in the historical context of their creation. In the 10th century, the discipline of cartography was still in its embryonic stages, a practice more akin to art and conjecture than to precise science. Significant geographical discoveries were frequently the outcome of fortuitous accidents and navigational errors, and any accurate cartographic representation of a landmass was the hard-won fruit of incredibly lengthy, costly, and perilous expeditions. Despite this historical reality, several documents have endured in the world's archives that fundamentally challenge this established chronological narrative. The most celebrated and scrutinized of these anomalies is unquestionably the Piri map, a stunning document meticulously compiled in the year 1513. The creator, a distinguished Turkish admiral and cartographer, openly declared that he utilized a collection of 20 older source maps to construct his comprehensive worldview. He personally avowed that a portion of these ancient source materials had been preserved and passed down from the legendary Library of Alexandria, channeled through Constantinople, a tragic loss of a repository of ancient wisdom that was annihilated many centuries before his time. Upon careful examination of the Piri Reis map, one can distinctly identify a portion of the South American continent, and, extending to the south, a vast expanse of land that, according to a dedicated and growing body of researchers, aligns with an almost unbelievable degree of accuracy to the true subglacial coastline of Antarctica. Even more remarkably, just 2 decades following this,
In 1531, the esteemed French mathematician and cartographer Oronce Finé created another equally perplexing world map. This one, a beautiful cordiform or heart-shaped projection, not only features the southern continent, but places it in a position of central and commanding importance. This enigmatic landmass, which at the time had never been officially cited by any European explorer, is rendered as a complex polygonal shape, replete with intricate details suggesting flowing rivers, formidable mountain ranges, and broad sweeping valleys. A significant faction of modern scholars argues that Finé was likely illustrating a purely hypothetical and mythical terra australis incognita, a theoretical southern land believed by classical geographers to be necessary to provide a symmetrical counterbalance to the known continents of the northern hemisphere.
Nevertheless, the uncanny and unsettling accuracy of its depicted form, especially when superimposed over modern seismic maps of the Antarctic bedrock, remains a profound and deeply compelling, unresolved mystery. Another central figure in this cartographic conundrum is the German geographer Martin Waldseemüller. His 1507 world map is lauded as the first to depict the Americas as a distinct continental landmass, yet it too contains tantalizing and suggestive hints of a southern continent that, at that point in documented history, were nothing more than theoretical postulations. In the decades that followed, a proliferation of new and varied versions of these world maps continued to surface, each one seemingly building upon the last. Each successive chart reproduces a strikingly similar and consistent theme: a vast, detailed landmass dominating the southern pole, occasionally rendered with such a high degree of specificity as to include features like complex river networks and coastal indentations. This pattern inevitably leads back to the ultimate, persistent, and foundational question: if these maps are indeed accurate representations of Antarctica, how could their creators have possibly achieved such a remarkable degree of precision centuries before the continent was officially discovered and explored? The most staggering aspect of this mystery is not merely the documented presence of the continent itself, but the meticulous delineation of its coastline, a geographical feature that astonishingly corresponds to the actual shape of the land concealed deep beneath the permanent ice sheet.
For instance, if early mariners venturing into the southern oceans reported sighting large icebergs or a chain of small scattered islands, it is plausible that a cartographer, working thousands of miles away, could have misinterpreted these reports as evidence for the northernmost edge of a great southern continent. Furthermore, it was common practice in that era for mapmakers to creatively fill the vast, unknown regions of the world, the terra incognita, with imaginative landmasses, partially to make their maps appear more complete and partially driven by the classical belief in global symmetry. This is a particularly salient point in the case of Oronce Finé, who was celebrated more for his brilliant mathematical mind
and imaginative cartographic projections than for being a seasoned, world-traveled explorer. There is, of course, the ever-present and scientifically sober alternative explanation: sheer, unadulterated coincidence. Ultimately, the complex fractal shape of a continent's coastline is but a single element on a multifaceted map. If one consciously decides to strip away the alluring layers of romance and high intrigue, it becomes evident that many of these supposed early depictions of Antarctica also contain glaring, undeniable inconsistencies and errors. Certain depicted coastlines, upon closer inspection, bear a much stronger resemblance to the jagged southern tip of South America than to any known feature of the Antarctic continent, while other sections fail to correspond with any real-world topography at all. In these cases, the act of interpretation becomes highly subjective, often a reflection of a pre-existing desire to find a mystery, of projecting a sought-after enigma onto an ambiguous and ancient artifact. And yet, the mystery refuses to be dismissed so easily, for the startling precision of certain specific fragments of these maps is genuinely astonishing and difficult to explain away. Meticulous researchers who have undertaken the painstaking task of digitally analyzing the Piri Reis map, superimposing its outlines over modern seismic and radar-generated charts of the Queen Maud Land coast of Antarctica, have discovered a degree of correlation that strains the limits of coincidence. This correspondence is rendered all the more compelling and profound when one considers the scientific fact that without its current massive mantle of ice, the coastline of that region would indeed appear almost precisely as it is depicted on the 500-year-old map. Now, let us pivot our perspective, moving from the abstract, intellectual contemplation of Antarctica's representation to a direct, visceral, and human encounter with its awesome and unforgiving reality. One individual who personifies this harrowing confrontation was the legendary polar explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton, a man who survived what is arguably the most infamous and terrifying ice trap in the history of modern exploration. The saga of Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition is a powerful epic of survival against all conceivable odds. In the hallowed annals of Antarctic exploration, it occupies a unique space. It was an expedition that discovered no new territory, established no permanent stations, and ultimately failed to achieve its primary ambitious objective. Yet, despite these apparent failures, it has become an immortal and inspiring symbol of indomitable courage, brilliant leadership, and the profound, almost unbelievable resilience of the human spirit. This fateful expedition, led by the charismatic Sir Ernest Shackleton aboard his robust ship, the Endurance, set sail from England in 1914, its course set for the very heart of the Great White Wilderness. Shackleton's audacious and unprecedented goal was to be the first to complete a full overland crossing of the entire Antarctic continent, a grueling journey from the shores of the Weddell Sea to the Ross Sea on the opposite side, a punishing trek of over 3,000 kilometers across treacherous ice shelves, monstrous glaciers, and the high polar plateau, utilizing traditional sledges and teams of hardy dogs. Destiny, however, had a far crueler yet ultimately more profound fate in store for him and his crew. By January of 1915, his vessel, the Endurance, was caught fast, ensnared in the relentless, unyielding grip of the dense Weddell Sea pack ice. The ship was trapped, rendered completely motionless. The Endurance, their home and their lifeline to the outside world, was held captive, utterly helpless in the vast, indifferent frozen ocean. The men listened as the ice groaned, fractured, and shifted around them like a living, malevolent entity. Finally, in October of 1915, after 10 agonizing and morale-sapping months of imprisonment, the immense, inexorable pressure of the ice pack delivered its final fatal blow. The ship's hull was breached, and its mighty timbers were crushed and splintered. The crew was now completely and utterly isolated, cast adrift on a precarious moving ice floe in the center of the most hostile and unforgiving environment on the face of the earth. The long, perpetual darkness of the Antarctic winter descended upon them like a shroud. The 28 men of the expedition survived in flimsy canvas tents, a daily, laborious routine of melting ice for drinking water, and subsisting on their rapidly diminishing rations, which they supplemented with the rank, blubbery meat of the seals and penguins they managed to hunt. They found themselves waging a desperate two-front war, one against the lethal, penetrating cold, and another, more insidious battle against the encroaching forces of despair and hopelessness. They were surrounded by a featureless, disorienting expanse of white, with no discernible landmarks and no guiding beacons, only a profound, soul-crushing emptiness, and a silence so deep it felt like a physical weight. Yet through it all, Shackleton, the boss, held his crew together. Every single day, without fail, he would make his rounds among his men, always ready with a joke, an encouraging word, inquiring about their health, and meticulously, almost obsessively, maintaining order and discipline. He understood the psychology of his men and refused to allow the toxic seeds of panic and mutiny to take root in the fertile ground of their desperation. When the very ice floe that served as their precarious floating home began to fracture and break apart beneath them, the men took to their 3 small open lifeboats and embarked on a perilous journey across the open, ice-choked Antarctic Sea. For days, they navigated through frigid, treacherous waters, battered by violent storms and blinded by incessant blizzards, until at long last they made landfall on the desolate shores of Elephant Island, a tiny, inhospitable, but blessedly solid piece of land beneath their weary feet.
There, amidst the barren, windswept rocks and glacial ice of Elephant Island, Shackleton, a pragmatist to his core, understood their dire situation with chilling clarity. Without external assistance, their fate was sealed. He made the difficult decision to select a small crew of 5 of his fittest volunteers, and with them, he boarded the most seaworthy of their battered lifeboats, the 22-foot James Caird.
Their destination was a remote whaling station on the island of South Georgia, a staggering 1,300 kilometers away, across the most tempestuous and dangerous stretch of ocean on the planet, the Drake Passage. They faced a relentless assault of monstrous, skyscraper-sized waves, perpetual, soul-numbing, freezing temperatures, their clothing perpetually waterlogged, their bodies racked with festering saltwater sores, and the corrosive sting of the sea spray seeping into their very bones. This unimaginable ordeal lasted for 17 brutal days. With no GPS, no radio, navigating by dead reckoning and the rare glimpses of the sun through a small sextant, he guided his small frost-bitten team to the shores of South Georgia. When they finally staggered ashore, they were like revenants, gaunt and spectral figures barely recognizable as men. But their epic trial was still far from over. South Georgia is a formidable island of sheer, unclimbable cliffs, deep fjords, and heavily glaciated mountain ranges, and the whaling station they sought lay on the opposite side. To reach it, Shackleton, along with his 2 strongest companions, Tom Crean and Frank Worsley, proceeded on foot. With no maps, no climbing ropes, and no mountaineering equipment, they embarked on a non-stop 36-hour trek, traversing the treacherous, crevice-ridden, ice-covered mountains of the island's interior. Finally, utterly exhausted, they stumbled into the whaling station.
There, for the first time in nearly 2 years, Shackleton heard the alien sounds of civilization, music, the voices of other men, the feeling of warmth. It was salvation. He immediately set about organizing a rescue mission for the 22 men he had left behind on Elephant Island. But the impenetrable winter pack ice repeatedly thwarted his attempts. It was only on his 4th agonizing try, after 4 long and desperate months, that he was finally able to break through and reach his stranded men. He brought every single one of them home alive. This was never an expedition of geographical discovery. It was a profound and epic journey to the ultimate limits of human fortitude. And in this incredible saga, Antarctica revealed a fundamental truth about itself. It demands not knowledge or conquest, but character. Today, the hauntingly preserved wreck of the Endurance rests peacefully on the abyssal floor of the Weddell Sea. It lies there in the profound, eternal silence of the deep sea, a silent and poignant monument to those who dared to venture into the great white void and returned not as conquerors, but simply and triumphantly as human beings. Now we turn to Chapter 2, a discovery that was almost forgotten. In the austral summer of January 1820, sailing amidst the biting katabatic winds and the disorienting misty horizons of the vast Antarctic wilderness, the Russian naval vessels Vostok and Mirny achieved a monumental feat, becoming the first ships in recorded history to officially sight and approach the shores of Earth's elusive southernmost continent. The expedition was under the joint command of Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen, an officer of the Imperial Russian Navy, whose character was said to be as cool, deliberate, and imperturbable as the vast ice floes he expertly navigated, and Mikhail Lazarev, a highly experienced and respected mariner who would later achieve legendary status as a naval hero in the Battle of Sinop. There was a unique and almost poetic symbolism in this historic achievement, the very first to lay documented eyes on the continent that had remained a mythical, unattainable prize for centuries were those who arrived, it seemed, without any overt nationalistic or territorial pretensions. They meticulously charted what they saw, but they made no grand proclamations of sovereignty. They did not plan to flag to claim it for the Tsar, though they certainly had every right of discovery to do so.
At that particular juncture in history, the Russian Empire was little concerned with the race for geographical supremacy. The imperial court in St. Petersburg was deeply preoccupied with the complex and delicate diplomatic chess game of European politics, and did not view the remote and seemingly barren Antarctic as a region of any significant strategic or economic interest. Consequently, in the expedition's sober and scientifically precise official reports, the newly discovered landmass was described with understated accuracy simply as an ice shore, a description entirely devoid of the triumphant nationalistic rhetoric, flag-planting ceremonies, or bold pronouncements of possession that characterized the explorations of other nations during that era. This reserved approach may have been a commendable reflection of pure scientific integrity and a lack of imperial ambition, or, with the benefit of hindsight, one could argue it was a moment of profound strategic short-sightedness. While the monumental discovery by Bellingshausen and Lazarev went largely unnoticed and uncelebrated back in Russia, other global powers were already preparing to act with far greater resolve and territorial ambition. In the following year, 1821, the American sealer John Davis purportedly made the first documented landing on the continental landmass and promptly declared its discovery for the United States. He was soon followed by a succession of explorers and sealers from Great Britain, Norway, and France. Each expedition planting flags and laying claims, thus initiating the complex and often contentious process of carving up the last unclaimed continent on Earth.